coronavirus could strike anyone at any time. And so, more than ever, teams are quite focused on making sure their reserve drivers are capable enough to take over for a race weekend and still do a good enough job. But some teams have kind of blurry lines over who their exact reserve drivers are. You know, some teams it comes out that they've signed, Alfa Romeo, we know that Kubica is their reserve driver, but, what happens if he's not available? Because every team, there's not really any single team that has one driver who would definitely take over. Because most of the reserve drivers are doing other things and they just maybe not be available, or maybe they just want to give it to someone else, like the case with Van Dorn was fully available last year for Mercedes, but he didn't. So, starting off with Williams, which is quite an obvious one, Jack Aitken. We saw it last year, and when he took over Russell, when Russell didn't race in the Mercedes that weekend, he would 90% he would do it again. But he is racing in another championship this year. I can't remember the exact one. It's not F2. So if he wasn't able to race for Williams, and they had to get someone else, there's probably one main other driver that would get it, and that's Dan Ticktum. And the chances of him not being available are very slim because he is in F2. So, he's always going to be available because he could be challenging for the title. So, he might have to weigh up his options. Actually, do I sacrifice the title to drive a Williams? Or, it depends. But if he drives the Williams and has a really good weekend, that could secure him an F1 seat for next year when most likely Russell moves on. So I feel like if Aitken's not available, it's Ticktum. And then if Ticktum doesn't want to, or, is not available, it's probably, they've got Jamie Chadwick, Roy Nissany. So it's going to be probably one of them two. But Chadwick's doing Extreme E with Veloce, Team Veloce, and but Nissany is also in F2. So those are kind of your four drivers who would take over from the Williams team. So then Haas F1 team, again, another quite obvious one. You've got Pietro Fittipaldi, who will, again, 90% likely that he will race for them. He did last year as well. But say he wasn't, it gets a bit more interesting. I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure Delatraz is still has contacts there, so maybe it would be him, but he's not in F2, so maybe not. And then you might just find that it's actually just not a random, but one of the F2 or probably not F3, F2 Ferrari Academy drivers. Obviously, they do have the relationship with Ferrari, so it's maybe an Armstrong or a Schwartzman or someone like that would take over for the weekend. But I mean, it's pretty confidently that you could say that Fittipaldi, same with Aitken, that they will take over that seat. Another obvious one, it's starting off with the obvious one, it gets more exciting. Alfa Romeo, it's going to be Kubica. And this is almost exactly the same as the Haas. If it happens not to be Kubica, which it probably wouldn't be, but if Kubica for some reason could not drive, it would, again, I would assume it would be Schwartzman, Eilert, someone like that. So there's not much to speak on there. It will be Kubica or any Ferrari Academy driver, especially even stronger there with the Alfa Romeo link, especially if it was Giovinazzi who was to go out. Essentially, that second seat is decided by Ferrari, so do they still get to make the decision? I'm not entirely sure when it comes down to that. AlphaTauri, interesting one, because they kind of share their reserve driver with Red Bull, so it would be Albon, most likely, maybe Buemi. They also have Sergio Camara on their contacts, or maybe they would go for one of the F2. They want to get a possible person if Gasly is to move to Alpine next year, like I said in my 2022 driver predictions. But if he was to go, do they want to get someone who's going to replace him, i.e. Vips, Lawson or Daruvalla, to take up for the weekend? So maybe it would be either Yuri Vips, Liam Lawson or Daruvalla. Again, I'm not 100% sure how you say his name. But I'm pretty confident in saying it would be Alex Albon to take over the AlphaTauri for the weekend, as that is Red Bull's driver. And if you go on the AlphaTauri website, it does have Alex Albon listed as one of their drivers, like after, obviously, Tsunoda and Gasly. So then moving on to Alpine, and they have an official reserve driver in Daniel Kvyat. Obviously, lost his seat at AlphaTauri last year, but now he's moved to Alpine as a reserve driver. Again, if it wasn't to be him, my guess would be definitely Piastri. As I record this, it's the final day of F2 testing, and Piastri's been killing it really. So I imagine he's going to have a good fight in F2 this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did end up giving him a drive if it was to happen later on in the season. But nearer the beginning, they'd probably get a much better driver in Kvyat because more experience. Then you go to Ferrari, which is an interesting one because they have Callum Ilott as a reserve driver, or a test driver, I think he is. I don't think he's a reserve driver, so I don't know if that means that he would get the drive. And to be honest with you, I think they're more likely to give it to someone like either Giovinazzi, who was their official test driver for the past few years, I believe, or maybe is there still their official reserve driver, and that would then lead to Kubica jumping in the Alfa Romeo. But I would probably argue to say that if they're already... It's a point of where does it happen in the season, because nearer the beginning, they're going to want the better driver for the more points, but nearer the end, you just want to give someone experience. For example, Schumacher. Will they give Schumacher a chance to have a race in a Ferrari, a race in a top... Ferrari's not really a top car anymore, is it? But, a good car. So that'll be interesting. Aston Martin. This is interesting with Aston Martin and McLaren. They both share Mercedes drivers, kind of. So Aston Martin, I would guess it would be Hulkenberg, because he's already done it 3 times. So there, I don't think you'd see Van Dorn or De Vries, although you could. But I would imagine it would be Hulkenberg to take over if Vettel or Stroll had to sit out. But at McLaren, if Norris or Ricciardo ended up sitting out, I would probably say it would be Stoffel Van Dorn, considering he drove there in, 2017 and 2018, or maybe not 2018. But he driven there a few years ago, so it will probably be Van Dorn for McLaren, but maybe Hulkenberg or De Vries at McLaren as well, or maybe even Sergei Sorokin. Obviously, he's not with them anymore, but there's still the links there, which you can't really look past. So then Red Bull, and they've also got Alex Albon as an official reserve driver, so it will be Albon. He's probably gonna be, if they need him, he's going to be, and it's on a weekend race doing DTM. They're just gonna take him out of DTM. They don't need him in DTM. He's only doing a select few weekends. They will take him out of DTM to race in the Red Bull. Again, if it wasn't Albon, just to tell you who it could be, they could bring up either Gasly or Tsunoda. I would say if they were going to bring up one of those two from AlphaTauri, it would be Tsunoda, because Gasly already had that half season. As much as Gasly's a better driver, he's not going to be coming back to Red Bull anytime soon, I feel. So realistically, Tsunoda is their next driver after Perez. So they're going to get him in, and also could be Buemi, because he has still got ties with them. So it could still be Buemi. And then finally, you got Mercedes, Van Dorn and De Vries. Could be any of them, most likely Van Dorn. But last year, can't forget George Russell. So I would say it would be George Russell. Unless Williams don't, because it's at the end of the day, it is up to Williams. Williams can say no because he's contracted to Williams, and so if they actually were in a back marker fight, they don't want to get rid of Russell, so they might actually say no because we're fighting here, and then Van Dorn would get to bring in. If it was later in the season, Williams were already far clear of Haas or too far behind them, then Russell would drive for Mercedes over Van Dorn any day. So there you go. Those are every single team's reserve drivers, and I feel it's especially relevant considering it's extremely likely that a driver will get COVID. Hopefully not, but it can very easily happen. So hopefully not, but it does really spice up the weekend. So if it does happen, those are the drivers who could be driving for them. So take that as you will, and hopefully Russell wins a race in a Mercedes this year, because I still cry most of the time. All the time, I still cry.